Welcome to the Modern Hippie podcast, where we'll be exploring all of my favorite boundary-pushing people and topics surrounding consciousness, psychedelics, mental performance, functional medicine, living in alignment, and so much more. I'm your host, Barrett Perlman, a former pro wakeboarder turned body worker, energy healer, and well, a modern hippie. And I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Modern Hippie podcast. I am joined today by Hamilton Souther, who is a shaman, a ceremonial leader, you're a visionary, founder of Blue Morpho Ayahuasca and Plant Medicine Center, and co-founder of LiquidEarth and FullStock NFT marketplaces. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, it was fantastic how I sort of stumbled across you. I found you on Aubrey Marcus's podcast from an old episode. It must be like a year old or something. Just happened to randomly shuffle there, and I was like, I got to meet this guy. I got to interview him for my podcast, and happened to add you on Instagram. And then the next morning, I got done surfing, and there you were in my inbox saying, "Hey, I'd like to be a guest on your podcast." And I was like, my goodness, are you tapped into the matrix?
Well, thank you very much. The universe is full of synchronicities, and it's an absolute pleasure.
It really is. I mean, I'm really fascinated on your journey to becoming a shaman. Where did that start? And at what point did you know you wanted to become a shaman?
Well, I had graduated from the University of Colorado. I studied anthropology. And the year after I graduated, I had a spontaneous spiritual awakening. And literally from one day to the next, I went from not having a spiritual life to a full-on, series of experiences of, really quintessential awakening. And in a very short period of time, I was, communicating with the way beyond normal, ordinary reality and able to go into altered states of consciousness. And I ended up on a journey down to Peru, really looking for a shamanic apprenticeship. I had had a bunch of visions, and in the visions, I was told that I was going to become a shaman. And I didn't really believe it. There was a kind of series of new experiences for me. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll go to Peru to see, if anything actually comes of this or not. But it seemed like a far-reaching fantasy at the time. And certainly, and sure enough, it all came true. And a number of years later, I was given the title of Master Shaman, and I had graduated from training. And then, we started practicing. And from that, I created Blue Morpho. And Blue Morpho became one of the first dedicated shamanic healing centers for people from around the world in the Peruvian Amazon.
Wow. So what a journey. So you get this download in a vision.
Totally.
I'm a little jealous because I would love to. I guide on psilocybin. That's my plant medicine. But I have heard more about the shamanism that you do. And can you explain to the listeners what being a shaman is? Let's start there.
Yeah. Fundamentally, a shaman is part of a tribal society and a tribal role. It's a mix of roles that you have in Western society. A shaman is part doctor, and in the Amazon, they use the medicinal plants that are found in the forest as, their pharmacopoeia, and they know hundreds of medicinal plants and their different uses. And it was knowledge that was passed down over, generation after generation of elders who learned more about the forest and how to administer medicines. And then they're also part counselor, and they kind of help the tribe in general kind of stay together and provide group cohesion. And then they're also, typically an advisor or a political role within their tribal society. And all of those different roles kind of intermix and ebb and flow in kind of your normal daily life in the Amazon.
Interesting. Now, I've heard a little bit of shamans kind of getting a bad rap I've heard some people prefer the term medicine man or medicine woman, and that, shamans sometimes don't always have the best intentions at heart. What has been your experience with that?
Well, first, we got to understand that the word shaman comes from the West. It was a word given to people that were seen practicing kind of, these ecstatic states of consciousness from Mongolia. And so the term really
Mm,
means, this person that is stepping outside of ordinary consciousness into the unknown. They have a very specific role. And, then they come back into normal, ordinary consciousness, typically having some kind of, knowledge or wisdom or gift to impart, which could be for healing purposes, or it could be direction, for the people that are involved in needing that. The term it's an outsider's term. In the Amazon, they don't use the word shaman for each other. Like, I wouldn't call myself a shaman to
mm,
another shaman. We're called medico vegetalista, which means doctor of plants or doctor of plant
mm.
medicine. And so that's much more like your naturopath, or a person who specializes in herbs in the West. And so it's just kind of a term that people have accepted over time, and I don't have any problem with it. But I do understand why some people have issues. In terms of the conduct of different shamans or medicine people, it really comes down to their intentions, and those intentions can
Mhm.
be really wide in what they express. Some people are very egoic and it's all about themselves. Some people are very service oriented and it's all about providing service, support, and help. And then there are all different kinds of arts. There are healing arts, there are warrior arts, there are defensive arts, and then there are the arts that people use to harm people, which is for us a travesty and something that we think is
Mm.
really terrible. But it is something that exists in the world, and when you study shamanism, it's something that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a shame to hear about people who come back and have had problems where like things get worse for them after they've partaken in the medicine. I think partaking in the medicine shouldn't make things worse, except for maybe going on like an existential journey of, did you make all the, if it shakes you up and forces you to take a look at your life and say, I don't think that I'm on the right path. Like, that should be the journey, not I came home feeling worse and now everything's a wreck and the energy's gone.
Oh, sorry, there's a slight delay. I was just going to say, I agree. I mean, as a healer, the intention has to be pure medicine and the well being of everybody that you're interacting with and supporting them. And that's not always, insisted upon by the different cultures. And I've always warned against the different kinds of
Mm,
medicine experiences that people can have in different tribal societies from around the world. And it's really important that you do research on the group of people that you're going to work with, what their tribal beliefs are, where they come from, what their intention really is for the ceremony before participating.
yeah, definitely. It all makes sense. And I guess I'm sort of diving into this more negative side first because I know you have some fascinating stories around helping lift this negativity from people who've experienced it. Um, can you share with me one memorable story around such a thing?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot. It turned out that the group of medicine people that I worked with were actually specialists in the healing of all the different kinds of dark arts and dark magics, and different kinds of spells that people do on each other, curses and things like that that they do. I mean, uh, I think a great story is we had a guest come to us who was actually from London. And it turned out that in London at that time, there was a West African shaman that was actually selling drugs and using the drugs as the way of tapping into the people that he sold the drugs to. And she came to us
Oh my
because
god.
she and her sister had actually purchased marijuana from him. And she got a really bad vibe about the whole situation and the guy and everything like that. And after leaving the guy's apartment, her sister rolled a spliff and they started to smoke it. And the sister took 3 hits from it and passed it to her, and she took one. And the sister literally collapsed into a state of mental illness and was taken to an asylum from that moment on and had never left. And she, from that moment on, had felt like there was some kind of like dark presence, entity, or monster that was following her, like in her shadow, right behind her back all the time from that point. And so she came to us to ultimately have that curse be released from her and to have that entity removed from her back and her shadow. And we got into ceremony, and it was wild. The shaman was not very impressed with what we were trying to do. And yeah, so we ended up having this big cosmic brawl over the situation. And we were actually, I mean, this is really out there, but we were actually like sent a lightning bolt that was going to strike the ceremonial house we were in, and I mean actual physical lightning bolt. And one of the shamans I was with
Mm.
threw up a kind of defense and protection, and the actual lightning bolt struck less than 100 yards away. And everyone in the ceremony heard the lightning bolt hit something above our house, maybe 200-300 feet in the air. And the next day, you could see in the ground, like I said, less than 100 yards away, where the lightning bolt actually struck, and there was a hole in the ground.
Wow. I mean, just that alone is giving me goosebumps. Like that's my telltale for someone's telling me some serious truths right now.
It was heavy. It was seriously heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from fucking marijuana too. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
holy
It literally
shit.
used the
So,
marijuana as a medium of exchange of the witchcraft. So yeah, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was the first time and
wow.
only time I ever came across that. And so that's why I thought it's a good story. It's also the first time I've ever told that story on a podcast. So yeah.
And so you describe this cosmic brawl, but like, tell me a little more because I've heard you explain in a little more detail. Like, where does this cosmic brawl happen? How does the shaman rise to like defend what they've done? The bad shaman.
Yeah. So, when you take visionary plants, people go into vision and they talk about, like different geometric patterns that people see and the fractals and everything that they see. And some people talk about going into what seems like other worlds that are sort of fantasy oriented, very, very psychedelic, very visionary, et cetera. Basically, it's through
Mhm.
that matrix that these, shamans or people who practice the consciousness arts basically face off, and ultimately they can fight each other. And so what it kind of looks like is, mostly out of sci-fi films, where you see, one side facing off with another side, and there's all of these different, energies and beings and entities involved. And it looks just kind of like a big crazy war is going to erupt. And then when the shaman sort of launches his attack, it all kind of comes at you in vision. And so, I don't know if you've ever, had a psychedelic experience where you really feel like it kind of takes you over when you can't get out of it, and
Oh yeah.
you're in a vision, and now you have to get to the other side of it. Well, in this case, it's like, that there's somebody else in the vision, that they have some kind of power or control, that they're actively trying to engage with you. And when they start to send stuff to you, you can feel it in your experience, negatively harming you or affecting you. And so you have to then defend yourself, and you have to
Mm.
then fight back. In the Amazon, they call them tests. So early on in your training, other shamans will test you to see how strong you are, how much resilience you have, or it's a kind of a ploy to try to get you to quit. So people will attack you to try to get you to quit your training, which is a pretty strong tactic. But the goal is ultimately
Yeah.
to defend yourself and push that off. So yeah, it's kind of like that.
Wow. So you decided that you wanted to go and train and be a shaman, and then you show up and they start testing you, like, hey, show us what you got first now that you're here, kind of situation.
Yeah, it was taboo to have people who are outside of the bloodlines, especially foreigners, be allowed into the shamanic mesas when I got there. And so, whereas
Mm.
most people think it's kind of like all light and love and it's all beautiful and it's all for medicine purposes, and that's sort of the Westerners' attitude about it, there's a whole underbelly of that that's really much more like Fight Club. And the Amazonian mesas, kind of stand up in that way. And so you can kind of think of it in a territorial kind of way, and also a way of testing your strength and testing your virtue and testing your merit in consciousness to be able to be strong enough to be a ceremonial leader. And so it's a contentious space, and people fight over it, and it's really heavy. And one of the things that they do when there are young apprentices is they test them. And if you're a foreigner, it's much worse.
Mm.
And so in my case, I was one of the first foreigners to ever be invited into a traditional bloodline. And for that, I had to pay my dues. And that meant that a lot of people down there were, really unhappy with the decisions that the shamans had made to accept me and the taboos that they had broken. And
Mm.
so that led to a lot of conflict for about the first 10 years that I was there.
Oh my gosh, 10 years. I mean, I guess that's good that you study so long to be a shaman. You're taking people's spirits at risk and their livelihood, their energy. Did you actually live down there for 10 years in the Amazon?
Yeah, I've lived for over 15 years in the Amazon, and I trained completely off grid for over 4.5 years. And then we ended up building our center and receiving guests. And so, yeah, during that period of time, it's, obviously really intense training. And that's one thing that people don't really hear about in the West so much, is that the real traditional training and indigenous training is typically for a long period of time. 5 to 10 years of going through
Hmm.
the basic apprenticeship is normal. And then after that, when you graduate and you're considered a master shaman, it's kind of like where your career begins. And then you have to continue training. And so really it's anywhere from 10 to
Hmm.
20 years before really feel centered in what you're doing and what you've learned.
Wow. And what drew you to ayahuasca as a medicine?
I was guided that way. Before I ever took it, I had heard a couple of accounts from other people and read one account in a book, and that was all I really knew of it. I knew of some other visionary plants like San Pedro, Wachuma, psilocybin, etc., but I really didn't have a lot of experience in these things. And I was really just following this guidance of spirit to be able to find this apprenticeship. And I had a guidebook at that time. This is kind of pre-internet really being used for travel. And so I used the guidebook, and in the guidebook it kept telling me, oh, you have to like go drink ayahuasca. I would, have these spirits telling me, oh, you have to go find this guide. And I didn't really know why. And then it was just such
Hmm.
a strong calling, I decided to do it. And it was in that first ceremony that I ultimately had the visions that I had found my apprenticeship, and I had found the location where I was going to apprentice, which was really far out in the middle of the wilderness. And so I was really guided and led in that direction. And honestly, in my first ayahuasca ceremony, it was one of the first times I had come across something where I just literally thought I couldn't do it. It was so intense and it was so harrowing. Yeah, and it was so brutal, and it was also so beautiful, and it was also one of the most amazing experiences of my life. But some of the most terrifying, intense 6 hours I had ever experienced up until that point.
Wow. Yeah, I've done ayahuasca a couple times. I'm excited to go do it some more next month. But a lot of people ask me, "Oh, what's it like?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's this great healing experience." But for, to remember that it's not always that for everybody. It is a healing experience, yes, but what that means for you on your journey and your path of healing is different for everybody. What would you say are like the typical things someone would expect in going to an ayahuasca ceremony?
So first, like I said, you want the intention to be all about medicine and healing. So if we're going to go and we're going to try these plants, they are called plant medicines, and so we want the people that are using them and hosting the ceremonies to be doing it for good, and doing it for medicine purposes, and coming from the highest place they can, and really supporting everyone that's there. And once you're in a medicine circle and you're in a medicine ceremony, what you can expect is a series of physical changes that are going to take place. Anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes into the ceremony, you're going to start to feel a warming in the body, and then maybe even a cooling. And then you can get really hot. So temperature fluctuations really normal. Some people have nausea, not everybody, but especially if you have like heavy
Mm.
energies or dark energies inside you, as it starts to, kick off, you can kind of feel those energies brooding in the body. And then at some point they'll be purged. You can also, start to feel like really shaky and kind of like you're dematerializing, and you can kind of find that you're breathing harder, and a lot of that comes from the way that you're using breath. So you always want to use a calming breath to help
Mm.
center yourself and really think of it as like a really deep meditative journey. Um, and then you can start to see pixelation in the space all around you, and then from the pixelation, it can start to take shape and form, like different kinds of sacred geometry and really beautiful and immaculate patterning. that can ultimately become very dense and multi-D. And some people see that it starts to swirl and start to move. Depending on the ceremony, if they're using traditional instruments, typically your vision will pulsate or move with the instruments that are being played. If there are people that are there chanting and guiding the ceremony, you'll see them guiding and directing different kinds of energy. And it's really amazing because of how lucid you become. You can really feel the energy, and then the visions turn on. And I think that has a lot to do with what you're going through. A lot of people experience really
Mm,
intense memories. A lot of other people have unbelievably psychedelic kinds of visions. You can start to experience the nature around you becoming very alive, and you can feel unbelievably connected to everything, to the earth, to the energy, to the nature, to the plant life, to the insects, to the birds, to the frogs, to kind of everything that would be there in that space around you. Um, Typically people will purge, and so that can be an
mhm.
energetic release or it can be a physical release. When you purge physically, you typically vomit. Some people also,
Right.
go to the bathroom, which is okay. I mean, it's another kind of purge. um, but typically there's like a psychosomatic or really strong mental understanding of what's being purged and what's coming out at that time, and the thoughts can kind of fixate on it. If it's really dark stuff from people's past, it comes out sometimes in a pretty cathartic way. There can be a lot of intense emotions that come with it too. And the ayahuasca is known as a real healing plant for the mind and for the brain itself. And so while the mind and the brain's being worked on, you can have really fast thoughts. Lots of people say that they have, more thoughts, or they were thinking faster than they ever had in their life. We always tell people to center in their heart when they're
Mm,
going through that part of the experience, to really ground in the heart, really go to their deepest place of love, so that they can just let the mind go
mhm,
and let the plants work on the mind. And then typically
mhm,
at some point there's a peak in the experience, and at that moment it can be really otherworldly. People talk about seeing all different kinds of entities, all different kinds of beings, or really going out of body into these otherworldly kind of experiences. Some people think of it as like a real lucid dream state as well. And then typically incredible bliss comes towards the end of the ceremony, like
mm,
unbelievable love, unconditional love, divine love, source love, bliss. All these relationships that you have get healed. You see people beyond the physical to their energy and who they really are, kind of like soul or spirit. And you can really repair an unbelievable number of relationships through that process. And then in that bliss state, it's really beautiful. It's really calm. It's sublime and ecstatic, and most people don't even want to leave it. They're like, oh my gosh, if we could stay in this state of consciousness forever, it would be amazing. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
yeah, yeah, I fully understand that wanting to stay. I, yeah, and interesting, because for me, when I do ayahuasca, that bliss state is something I get to first, like right off the
Oh,
bat. The
awesome.
mother's like, "Hey, let me remind you that you're one, you're connected with all things," and so it's been always a beautiful place for me to start because, especially, I think I started doing ayahuasca maybe like 4 years ago, and then again 2 years ago, and that was just something I didn't feel at the time. I didn't feel unconditional self love. I didn't feel fully connected to the universe. And so, yeah, it's really nice to start in that place. But it's interesting to hear a lot of people end in that place, which makes the journey and the purging and everything so beautiful and so worth it. What has been one of your most memorable ayahuasca journeys, ayahuasca ceremonies?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot. Each one is memorable in its own way, but I think the ones that have really the most intense
Mm,
visionary experiences, or the ones where you feel like you get the biggest downloads that just kind of are those aha moments where everything makes total sense. I remember one that I think was
mm-hmm,
really powerful early on in my training. Um, in that ceremony, I was really scared of going crazy. I had this thought like, oh, I could go crazy. I don't want that to happen. I was just really scared of that concept. And I remember this incredible vision of these hands coming on either side of my face. And they were they're like huge rainbow hands. And it's like they just grabbed me super gently on either side of my face. And it was like I was staring into the infinity of ayahuasca. There wasn't like there was
mm,
another face on the other side of it, just the hands. And I was looking through this portal just into, infinity. And there was this voice, this really, really powerful voice, but very soothing and very loving. And it just said, you cannot go crazy. And in that moment,
Mm.
I really understood it, that this was not something that I was going to, somehow fall into or something like that. And I saw that there were people that were crazy and there were people that just weren't crazy. And it wasn't like something that was going to happen because of the practices or, what I was dealing with at that time. And so it was very reassuring, and it was a tremendous, moment, because all of that fear that went with it just magically vanished at that time. And I didn't feel scared anymore of being in ayahuasca. And it was such a just incredible gift to have received that teaching from the plant at that time.
Hmm. Now, are you a psychonaut as well?
I've definitely experimented and explored. I mean, I've really been interested in exploring consciousness. I spent
Mm-hmm.
about 14 years heavy just in the Amazonian practices. And then after that period of time, I decided to explore outside of the practices. And it was a really joyous
Mm.
experience to get to work with lots of other plants. And so I've worked with, most of the other visionary plants, not all of them, but most of them. And, I feel tremendously grateful. I definitely think the psychonaut path is important to be able to continue to expand consciousness and search for wisdom and knowledge and altered states, and through that there's a tremendous amount of learning that can take place.
Amen. I'm a psychonaut. I love exploring consciousness. To me, the downloads that you get in that space are just so wild. And the things I've come out, and I have so few friends who are psychonauts, and oftentimes it's like my best friends who aren't that catch the brunt of, oh my god, I got to tell you what I just experienced, and trying to explain to them like, wait, okay, so then on my way out I got this download where like my spirit guides grabbed me and they were like, you have to learn how to read the pulse. And I'm like, the
Mm-hmm.
pulse? They're like, you have to learn how to read the pulse. And I'm like, okay. They're like, go now. And I'm like, that's like a lot. That's a long-term plan, like learning to read the pulse. Okay. Or you just get those random messages that are for you, or you um, discover these. I'm always trying to put the pieces together, and I think that's part of the problem, is using the analytical mind a little too much and not trusting the intuition of divinely knowing something when you see it. Have you gotten to do psilocybin much? How would you compare psilocybin to ayahuasca?
Yeah, I think psilocybin is an incredible medicinal plant, and it's an incredible teacher. And what I really like seeing is that there's, research being done that's now proving that. And hopefully over time we're going to
Mhm.
see, change in the way that it's perceived, and really understood as a medicine. What I find about it is that, to me, it's one of the best brain medicines I've ever met. And it's, super
Mm.
important to balancing the mental state and brainwave state. And then through that, you can have these incredible visionary experiences. And it's just such a great teacher. So I think of it as a teacher plant, and I think of it as an unbelievable visionary plant. Uh, if you get into a really comfortable state in it and you can get really centered in yourself, it can allow you unbelievable depth of consciousness and what you can see and experience. It's tremendous in terms of navigation, so you can set your intention on very specific, locations or purposes or healings, and you can receive them. Like you say about downloads, it's incredible for opening up your mind and getting out of the different kinds of blocks that you have. And so I think of it as just an incredible
Mm.
teacher, and I feel really honored and grateful to have been able to sit with it, many, many times. And I think of it as being on par of, importance as ayahuasca and San Pedro and, peyote. I think they're all incredible teachers in their own right, and it's just, really a beautiful thing now to see it being treated as a medicine.
Absolutely. I'm loving the research, and it almost feels like a shame that ayahuasca, the research into that is going to be so far behind, because I think those journeys are so important as well. And like the football player Aaron Rodgers just came out saying ayahuasca is probably the reason behind why he did so well. And I love seeing that people from all walks of life are now coming forwards and trying to get the message out that these plants are so helpful in so many areas. Do you think plant medicine is for everyone?
No, I mean, I don't think plant medicines for everyone. I think plant medicines are. Like there's so many. There's literally
Mhm.
hundreds of plant medicines, and they were the first medicines before there was any other kind of medicine. So I know that we've gotten really
Right.
used to having pharmacies and pharmaceutical medicines, but it's important to understand that first there were plants and plant medicines, and then we figured out how to create other kinds of medicines. And so I think plant medicines are for
Mhm.
everybody. I think, you have to be very aware of, the side effects and potential negatives of certain kinds of plant medicine. And so you have to know if you're a good candidate for them. um, like with ayahuasca,
Mhm.
there's a lot of people who just can't take it. They have either psychological reasons or psychiatric reasons, or they have different health concerns that just wouldn't allow for it. Like their cardiovascular system or their nervous system isn't in an appropriate state to be able to participate. But if you looked at that person and you thought,
Mhm.
well, you know, what other plant medicines could be really good for them? There are other visionary medicines that could be really helpful to that kind of person. And then there are also non visionary plant medicines that can be really great. And so, I think plant medicines are important for everybody, but there's this idea of the visionary ones, and you just have to, know the physical health state you're in and if the plant medicine that you're going to take is going to be appropriate for you.
Absolutely true. And so now you work with people. Do they still come to your center? I know there was like this COVID break, and it's my understanding you were able to take ceremonies online. Like, how did that materialize?
Yeah. So first, yes, we're reopening Blue Morpho, which is incredible. So we're unbelievably grateful that we're getting this opportunity. When COVID first happened, where we were was one of the first places in the world to shut down, and it was one of the last places in the world to open up, and it was
Hmm.
also one of the places that was hardest hit by COVID. And so, kind of with taking
Wow.
all of that into consideration, it's been a while before we've been able to reopen, but thankfully we are, and we're having our first retreats in October, November, and December of this year. So that's just an
Oh,
incredible,
fantastic.
yeah, it's just incredible that that's happening. Um, so I forgot the other half of your question. Could you repeat it?
Oh, how did you take it all online?
Oh yeah. So the online part all came about really looking for ways to be able to advance in the work that we were doing. We noticed that there was a certain number of people that could come and see us in the Amazon, and you know say like circa 2012, 13, 14, there weren't as many ceremonies going on an international level, and we were just looking for a way to be able to reach more people. And so we started to work when online streaming just started. We started to work with online ceremonies and
Mm,
practice and figure out a way for how everyone could get into a collective state of consciousness and really tap into that field of consciousness that we're all really sharing, this idea of mind share, collective consciousness, etc. And so,
mhm.
we ultimately created this technology around how we would be able to all stay connected, be able to go into different visionary states together, and be able to have ceremony all over the world. And so we did a number of years of study and testing on it. And when COVID happened, it was an opportunity to be able to really unveil that through our platform and share that with our community and keep the plant medicine ceremonies going, even though COVID, was such an intense disrupt for everybody. It was really important because during that time, a lot of people were focused on the fear of getting sick. And the plant medicines teach you
Mm,
to be courageous in the face of illness and how to really boost your immune system and stay really strong so that you could do better if you did get sick or maybe not even get sick in the first place. So we were really promoting a message of well-being and health and lots of different kinds of medicinal plants that could be used, that you could even get at the grocery store. So not all the plants that we were talking
mm.
about were visionary plants. In fact, most of them weren't, but it was really about teaching people how to use herbs and how to use plants during that period of time when everyone was locked down and in their homes or apartments or whatever, and how to be able to use those plants to really produce even greater health.
I love that because yeah, it's such a shame here. Like I'm in America, and we just get so accustomed to going to the pharmacy and buying whatever pill you need or ordering all your supplements. But I mean, yeah, it all came from the forest first. And so when you start to implement combining those things and taking them as they're originally constructed, like the actual leaves of the herbs and combining them with the things that you need, I can see how it would be wildly helpful, especially during times of COVID. Um, and so, were you saying that there's like visionary, like psychedelic type plants at the grocery store?
No, no, I was saying they're not, you know. Well, actually there are. That's
Oh,
not
okay, okay.
entirely true. There are some that you can get at the grocery store.
Like, isn't there like
Uh,
nutmeg, cinnamon?
yeah, there's like nutmeg and cinnamon, and you can typically find valerian and kava kava, and you know, there's a few out there that you can
Mm,
find. But you know, really, we were working mostly with like more simple things, like how to use garlic and how to use onion and how to use turmeric, and also how to use cinnamon and different kinds of hot peppers and
mm,
capsicum and stuff. Really, just to promote health. We were doing dietas, so, you know, a dieta is a time of purification and a kind of fasting and a kind of strengthening of the body that goes along with that. And we would teach different body practices that were very much kind of like yin yoga, but with a little bit more movement to them. So it's very much like yin yoga
hmm
and very relaxing, but maybe in a flow state, kind of like Tai Chi. And we had developed those practices that could all
mm,
be done on the floor. So when people couldn't get to gyms or they couldn't get outside the way they normally would, we had different kinds of body-based practices for them. We tied it all together with these juice fasts so that the juice fast would support the body work, and then we would do ceremonies together.
cool. And so, I don't know if you can tell me this, but like, do you send them ayahuasca in the mail to do
No,
ceremonies? I
no,
mean,
no, no. Unfortunately, we can't do that just for legal reasons. But people, you
right.
know, are very resourceful. And so what we would do is recommend if people wanted to have a visionary experience, just to do it in a responsible way, in a place where, you know, they felt comfortable and it was legal to do so. And we just left it open to that. We allowed people to have any kind of medicinal plant that they were interested in participating with. You know, they were in the luxury of being
Mm,
in their own home. And so we were just facilitating the nature of the ceremony and making it a safe place for everybody to participate. We had people that were using all different kinds of medicinal plants. So, you know, some people were using cannabis. You know, some people were using different
mm,
kinds of mushrooms in different parts of the world. So really, there were all different kinds of medicinal plants being used. And the goal was to be able to guide the totality of those kinds of ceremonies. And also for people who weren't using visionary plants, they were using breath work and, you know, doing other kinds of ecstatic dance and ecstatic movements to be able to get into that altered state.
mm. Oh, I love dance. Love dance for moving the energy and tapping into that.
Mm-hmm.
So how exciting you guys are holding retreats again. What are your retreats like? How long are they? What would someone expect on a retreat?
Sure. So people come for 6 days, and during those 6 days, we'll do 4 ayahuasca ceremonies. So we get
Mm,
together and we go down the Amazon River for about an hour to the lodge. And once we get to the lodge, it's awesome. It's this unbelievably beautiful lodge. We have a massive ceremonial house, so there's a ton of space for everybody. And really, we just walk everybody through what they can expect and kind of a pre ceremony orientation and get everybody ready for the ceremony. And then that night we have our first ceremony. And then that kind of kicks everything off. And it gives us an opportunity to check in and see where everybody's at. And for a lot of people, it's their first experience with ayahuasca. So, you know, it's such an honor to be able to share that with them. And so we use that ceremony to kind of gauge everything for the rest of the week. And then, you know, during the days, we just ask everybody to do as many activities that they would like to do. There's, you know, 2 or 3 activities a day that are sort of more nature based or jungle based. And then we have different kinds of lectures and body work and, you know, practices that we teach. Sometimes yoga, sometimes qigong,
mm,
sometimes the practices that I developed. And so there's always something going on throughout the day. And then there's obviously rest times, and there's times to be able to go swimming and just hang out or rest in a hammock or take a nap, something like that. And so, you know, there's really, really amazing food and these incredible lectures and storytelling times and question and answer sessions. And we go deep into what the plants are all about and how to be able to receive them and get the most from them. And then we share intention and why we're there and what it really means to us. And one of the most amazing things about these plants is that that sort of like superficial part of ego and that fear just melts away after 1 or 2 days, and everybody just becomes family.
mm,
Everyone becomes tribe. everyone's there together. They're going through something that can be super intense, and there's all this compassion and love for everybody. And so this incredible dynamic forms, and this incredible friendships and deep relationships form. And we try to foster that, amongst everybody in the group, and just really make it the best environment possible for people's experiences with the ceremonies. And then, those intentions get taken into the next ceremony, and then we fulfill as many of those intentions as we can in ceremony, for healing or for transformation or for, cosmic exploration or awakening of consciousness. As we
Mm.
unpack all of that, there's so much that goes into all of that. And so that gets brought into each ceremony, and it kind of tailors how we hold the ceremony and kind of what everyone goes through. And then that just kind of blossoms throughout the entire week until, we've had our fourth ceremony and we've kind of wrapped up the week. And, then the integration really starts. And it's just a magnificent experience. It's just truly, there aren't words that can, put it into the box. It's just an unbelievable experience, and something that I'm still, unbelievably grateful for. I started doing this over 20 years ago, and I can't believe that we still get the opportunity to be able to share this.
Mm. How beautiful. Are you a healer as well? Do the shaman and healer sort of go hand in hand?
Yeah, I mean, we're considered, like I said at the beginning, medico vegetalistas. And so we
Hmm.
treat all different kinds of illnesses. So some of them, are just really kind of normal. Like, say you get parasites and you need to cleanse with parasites. But there are plants in the Amazon we use for
Mm.
parasite cleanse. If somebody, has a joint injury, there are plants that we use like right after the injury, and then also as ongoing treatment to deal with inflammation and things like that. So there's all different kinds of physical ailments that are treated, and then there's also, the psychological stuff. So, down in the Amazon, typically it's part of the traditions and culture that when you have traumatic events, before they become depression or before they become addiction or before they become PTSD, you already go to the plants and treat them. So when it's fresh, when it right after the trauma, you go to the plants and you heal that. And so that's kind of part of what we do as well. And then with Western illnesses, we've helped lots of people with all different kinds of illnesses over the years. And so, it's a real honor to
Mm.
get to work in the healing arts and in the healing professions. And, when there's healing to be done, we do our best.
Yeah. I mean, what a beautiful occupation. What a beautiful journey you're on. And is this center near where you trained?
Sort of. I mean, I trained about 24 hours away from where the center is. There aren't really any
Oh,
roads
okay. That's
that
it's
go
kind of
through
like
our
not
area.
really.
Well, it's all relative. I mean, yeah, it's all relative. It used to take me 24 hours, give or take, to get to where I trained, but that's, pretty
Hmm.
common in the Amazon, a day's worth of travel. So I had to go,
Mm.
on different river boats and smaller boats and then canoes. And I was in a place that was really uninhabited. The lodge is in a more inhabited place. It's for safety reasons. When I was first in the Amazon, I took
Hmm.
people out to where I was training, but fundamentally, it could be really dangerous. And so, as things grew, we knew we just needed a place that was ultimately safer, within an hour of a hospital if we needed it, et cetera. So we kind of detailed out and
Mm.
profiled what would be ideal to be able to set up a center to be able to receive people from all over the world. And, you know, ultimately, that's how we ended up landing where we are.
Cool. And do you ever train shamans? Do you ever pass that knowledge on?
Yeah, yeah. I have trained actually many people over the years. Some have progressed further than others, and some have made it all the way to Master Shaman. And so over the years,
Mm.
I've had a number of different students. We were part of a teaching mesa. So our group of shamans that all work together, we're also teachers. And so you teach in the form of apprenticeship. So people come and they do apprenticeship. And through that process, they, kind of learn alongside you. So they walk with you, they sit with
Hmm.
you, they participate in ceremony with you, they harvest plants with you, etc. And as you, treat people, you learn. And that's how I learned from the shamans that taught me. And so we passed down the knowledge. But with the reopening of Blue Morpho, we're actually going to be starting a mystic school. And so instead of just offering traditional
Mm.
apprenticeship, it's actually going to be much broader than that in terms of the curriculum that we offer. And so it's going to be an opportunity for people of, all different degrees of interest and time commitments, et cetera, to be able to get, an even deeper experience if they're interested in it, and, learn in that fashion. So we're really excited about that.
Oh, I'm really excited about that. I think I'm going to have to talk to you personally a lot more about that, what that looks like. Because, yeah, my upcoming trip feels, I'm going to Peru for 3.5 weeks. I originally wanted to go for 5 or 6, and just feels a little short now. And I'm like, I know I'm going to be called to go back soon, just a matter of how soon.
Awesome. Where are
And
you going?
I am, so I'm doing a 10-day guided tour with a company out of Canada called Sacred Earth Journeys. And they pair up with this medicine man, Freddie Quispe Singoa, who guides a bunch of tours. And so he'll take us to all these sacred sites everywhere. So we're actually starting by doing 3 days of ayahuasca with him. And then that's sort of not a full part of the tour, but it was like an add on a bunch of us did. And so we'll do that with him in his hometown, and then in Cusco, and then we'll go to Machu Picchu and um, all these sacred sites that I still don't yet know the names of, but like, the spot where the healers got initiated, where there's all the different terraces of the ecological zones. And I'm an energy healer and, psychedelic guide. And so for me to go and get these initiations, these places, and we'll also do San Pedro while we're there twice. And so I'm looking forward to having it be this expansive experience that can add on to what I help people with regularly. But so then I have this like week at the end of my trip where I'm like, do I go surf for a week? Or it doesn't feel like I have enough time now to go to the Amazon and really experience the Amazon as deeply. I mean, I know I'm going to get to the Amazon and I'm never going to want to leave. So like, is a week enough?
Probably not.
I
Although
don't
it
know.
does
Maybe you
sound
can
like
offer
an
me.
incredible week.
Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think I should still go to the Amazon for the week instead of going surfing and get that extra download while I'm there? I can surf anywhere. It's,
I don't know. I think you have a good trip planned. I would go to the beach and go surfing and integrate. The waves up on the northern coast is, really special as well. And so I think you get to see a lot. And then I would
mm-hmm.
come on a trip to the Amazon when you want to just focus on that. And, I would come for a longer period
Yeah,
of time, at least 2 or 3 weeks in its own right, and really give that an opportunity to
yeah,
set in and really sit with ayahuasca and maybe do a dieta as well, which I think could be really powerful for your
mm-hmm.
healing work.
Yeah. Well, you said the exact same thing my psychic said, so I think I'm onto something. Everyone's tapped in. Have
Absolutely.
you heard of a spot there called? Have you heard of Dos Mundos
No. Do you know
down in?
what it's nearby?
I want to the spot that you fly into for the Amazon, kind of. It's in Yurimaguas.
Okay, near Yurimaguas. Okay, yeah, yeah. I know
hmm
Yurimaguas. Yeah.
So I was sort of referred there through my retreat center in Guatemala, and was thinking about going there. But I'm certainly in love with what you offer. You're sort of shifting my focus. Where are you near?
We're outside of Iquitos, Peru. So you fly from Lima into
Oh, okay.
Iquitos, and so it's in the
hmm
northeastern part of Peru in the Amazon, and
Mm,
it's a city on the Amazon River. And so, our retreat center
cool.
is an hour outside of the city, and you can fly into the city. It's one of the most
hmm
remote places in the world that you can only get to by water or air. There are no roads in and out of the city.
Mm,
It's a really wild place. It's really
awesome.
interesting. Yeah.
And so you mentioned your retreats are like a week long. Do you have the options to come and stay? Can I have the option to come and stay longer?
I'm sure that's something we can discuss. I think with the Mystic School, we're going to have much longer opportunities there. And so, as that
Mm,
curriculum gets built out, I'd be happy to share that with you and everyone else who would be interested in coming. I think, there are times where you can
yeah.
have really an acute intervention into ceremony. And, that's really good for cleansing purposes and healing purposes. But when you're wanting to train or you're wanting to learn, it's better to be able to stay for a longer period of time, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks,
Hmm.
even 2 months or 3 months at a time, depending on what your schedule allows. And so I think as we get the school going
Yeah.
and we start to get people involved who are really interested in really more immersive experience, that we'll be offering that as well.
Cool. Well, sign me up and we'll continue this conversation offline.
All right.
But so now I'm really curious how NFTs fit into this whole picture.
Well, it's an interesting kind of saga and story. But what ultimately happened was that the people who were coming down on our retreats come from literally all walks of life. And there were a lot of people who were
Hmm.
really interested in technology. And they were coming to ayahuasca for consciousness expansion, coming from the technology sector. And I was treating ayahuasca like a technology. So I said, these are consciousness technologies. They're, tens of thousands of years old. Um, you can learn about modern technology and different kinds of, engineering states and mathematical states inside the visionary experience. And, people had those kinds of transcendental experiences with us. And it just turned out that people very early on in the invention of crypto, first with Bitcoin and then Ethereum, and then from there, the expansion of different kinds of cryptocurrency and then NFTs, were actually coming to our lodge as guests. And I was interested in what they were doing. They were interested in
Mm.
what I was doing, obviously. And so in that exchange, I learned all about these, kind of new cutting edge forms of technology, as they were literally being invented. So we first heard about Bitcoin in 2010, 2009, 2010, and then Ethereum right when it happened, and then NFTs right when they happened. And so I was really interested in kind of how consciousness and technology were merging, and how people were using visionary
Mm.
experiences to affect the technology that they were creating. And so that just got me involved in a think tank of people involved in the crypto space. And I was really interested in how we could support creators and artists. And so I wanted to find a way that we could monetize, creators' digital art in literally new, expansive ways. I thought that the creators were the people that were, you know, as a collective in our society, really ostracized and kind of pushed aside in terms of their ability to be monetized for their work, and that most of the art that they were creating wasn't something that they could ultimately live on. And there was the whole idea of the starving artist. And I just thought there has to be a better way. And so I started to look at NFTs as a way to potentially disrupt the media space and the art and entertainment space. And so I know I was, very
Mm.
early in that line of thinking. And it was really about supporting artists and helping artists and the creatives of our society ultimately live a better life and be better rewarded for their creativity. And so that took me on the journey into, NFTs. I always thought of the work that we did as shamanic arts, and I thought of the shamans as artists in their own right, and many are sculptors and
Mm.
painters, et cetera. But I also thought that the ceremony itself was a kind of art form, and the way the ceremony was held, and we would, create visions for people, and it was like painting with infinity. It was, painting with creation and
Mm.
source itself, which was just, an incredible medium and matrix to express yourself through. And we would do it with sound and with instruments, and it very much sounds like chanting or music. And so my heart went out to all of the different artists that had this tremendous creativity inside of them that they wanted to share with others, and in many places just couldn't. And so I wanted to do something for them. And so I put a group of people together to build a team that could build an NFT platform to support the artists.
Cool. So does that mean you have your own NFT collection? Like you have your own I don't actually own an NFT yet. I'm still learning all of the lingo, but like you have the art that's out there for purchase, or you have the marketplace where people come to purchase everything.
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, we as a group created a bunch of art, and
Mm.
it's going to be offered as NFTs, but we also have created the marketplace for literally an unlimited number of artists to be able to come and present their art and sell their art. And so we're interested in, disrupting all different aspects of the art marketplaces and art business, and also focusing on, the commercial uses of art and business uses of art. So there's different kinds of stock media and media that's used for advertisement and marketing, et cetera. And so we think that those are really healthy markets for artists to be able to offer their creations and finally be fairly rewarded. So it's really collections. It's a marketplace for lots of artists, literally artists from all over the world to get to sell their own goods.
Cool. Oh gosh, I feel like now I may finally buy my first NFT or their shamanic shamanic art, like a vision, like psychedelic art. What's
Absolutely.
what's
Yeah, we're working with a project that's actually really interesting project. They have gotten visionary artists from around the Amazon, and they tour their artwork around the world. And they have
oh wow.
galleries display of that art. And so we're actually going to be partnering with them to NFT the digital versions of their art and support the visionary psychedelic artists in that way.
Cool. Yeah, no, I love the crisscross between exploring consciousness and mastering it in connection with the earth, and now this whole technological world that is floating around us in the air, literally, with just the Wi-Fi signals and the Bluetooth and their money is exchanging hands like right above my head right now. Bringing that all together in what you do. Do you ever get visions about how to better invest and better to expand your financial portfolio?
In some ways, sure. I think you can set intentions around that and you can be guided and supported. I actually wrote a book about that,
Mhm.
and so you can find it on Amazon.
Ooh,
Uh, yes, I think that
okay.
there are ways to use the visionary plants for that purpose. I think that you have to be careful because it's kind of a slippery slope, and it's easy to fall into
Mhm.
different kinds of delusions. And when you're talking about your own portfolio and how you're doing financially, I think you need to be careful. But yeah, there are definite ways to tap in, and I know a lot of people who had a clear vision of a little something whispering in their ear, and then they made very good financial decisions based on that information.
Right. I guess it is all about how you integrate it and interpret it and don't just throw all of your money at one thing, but like get some guidance, do it smart.
For sure, for sure.
Mm. Well, okay, so can you share with me another story about battling? I'm just so fascinated by these shaman battles. Like they're just like Dragon Ball Z or like Magic the Gathering or like Harry Potter. It sounds like going up against wizards. So what to circle back.
Okay.
um,
Um, yeah,
can anyone access these states? Like if
I don't think you would want to. I mean, my word of caution is that
yeah.
it's very real and it's not sparring, and you can't get out of it once you've gotten stuck in it. And
Hmm.
it's a test of your life and your well-being. And so that's the cautionary aspect of it. Um, if you, I think, practice enough traditional forms of shamanism and participate in enough visionary plants, at some point you'll come across it. And you know, like I said before, it's like a standoff in consciousness. So it's your consciousness up
Mm.
against somebody else's consciousness, and they have typically malevolent intentions. So trying to think of a good one.
Have you come close to like losing ever?
Oh, I've lost. For early on, I mean, I got
Oh,
I got really, 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 really like really destroyed. Yeah, terribly. I can tell
really?
that story. Yeah. The first shaman I
Please.
ever worked with actually in early in my training, decided to try to end my training. And he openly
Mm.
publicized in the small towns that he was going to do that, and he was going to do it by killing me, and he was going to use magical capacities or mystical capacities to do it. And so people could think he's crazy or not or whatever, but I had random people I had never even met come up to me and tell me like, hey, be careful, that guy's going around town threatening your life. And so I didn't think much of it. I was kind of like, okay, that's odd. I was young in my early 20s and didn't understand how severe this was. And I ended up in a ceremony, and in that ceremony, he decided that that was the night that he was going to try it on. And so, you know,
Really?
yeah, so the ceremony started, and things got pixelated, and I started to see visions and stuff like that. And then off to the distance, about 50 meters behind the house we were in, you could see a dark shadow standing there, and you could see the coal of a mapacho cigar going into and out of this thing's mouth. Although there's literally like no human standing there, but
Mm,
but even sober observers could see it. They could actually see something outside the house, and this movement of the arm up to the lips, and then the glowing of the coal getting brighter. And somebody
mm.
goes outside and they don't see anything there. It's like the vision disappears. And like I said, even sober people who were there saw it. And so then it was like, okay, this is on. um, so then in the vision, instead of the vision just being like colors and kaleidoscope, it just opens up into this battlefield, and there's no way out. Like, just literally no way out of this
Mm,
battlefield. On one side of the battlefield, there's just, you know, like a movie, like, you know, millions of these glowing beings of all these different kinds of demonic entities. And they're like clawing to get at you, but they're like being held off on one side of the field. And then at one moment, it was just like on. And at that point, it
oh
just in
shit.
every direction, I heard gunshots going off around me. I smelled gunpowder. I felt like, things hitting my body thousands of times a second. I was covered in all of these palm spikes. My body looked like a porcupine from all the different ways I had gotten shot. Um,
Oh.
I These beings besieged me everywhere I looked within the visions. They were there. Snakes were trying to bite me. Fetid animals with like these crazy teeth were trying to like rip my throat out. Uh, it was really intense. I started throwing up. As I threw up, I felt like my life force was being stolen from me, and I couldn't get it back. And I
Mm-hmm.
started to feel weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And as that happened, I felt like he was, taking my power and taking my strength and taking my life force. Um, so that went on for a period of time, and I kind of got direction from spirits about what to do, and I got direction from the ayahuasca about how to try to handle it. And then finally, I realized that he had me because of my fear. And so I started to purge the fear and purge the fear and purge it more and more and more and more and more. And as it came out of me, I got stronger. And so I was actually purging and throwing up into this
Mm.
bucket while I felt like I was getting completely destroyed. Um, and then it was really weird. It was like the guy got closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to me. And so he wasn't outside the room anymore. He was now inside the room until he was literally
Mm-hmm.
like standing over me. And I could see him, like his eyes wide open there, commanding everything that was happening to me. And so finally, I looked up, and I just vomited all of this like ectoplasmic slime fear all over the entity that was standing in front of me. And the moment that happened, it was like the spell broke, and the spell like was over in that moment. And all of a sudden I started feeling stronger, and I'm like, oh, that's all I have to do is just like puke all this nasty stuff all over this terrible guy. Okay, so I just started doing that.
That would have been
just like
horrible if that was.
just, just totally doing that. As I did that, I felt stronger, and I felt like I got my life force back. And then pretty soon in the vision, he just like bounced out of the room, and then it was on. Then it was like we were on the attack, and we were going, and we was me and these trees and these other animals that were with me, and this jaguar and these tigers and these lions and these eagles,
Mm.
and they were all like massive and rainbowy and beautiful, and it was like this was on. And then he broke into like I think four versions of him, and one went into an astral plane, one went into a water plane, one was still like in an earth kind of space. And so then I branched out, and we started to like try to corral him from different places. And so that went on for like another, I don't know,
Mm.
maybe half an hour to an hour. It was sort of like this game of chase. And so that got really wild.
Wow.
And then in one of the visions, he threw a planet at me, which I thought was really wild. I had never had that kind of an experience. So I'm like in outer space looking for this guy, and all of a sudden I see this thing like coming at me, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I realize it's a planet, and it just goes like whoosh, right past my
Oh my
head.
god.
Yeah, it was totally intense. And so,
Ah.
so finally, after about another 2 hours, I think we finally, caught him, and then, ultimately kind of took all the power back that he had taken, and cleansed ourselves of that
Mm.
experience, and came out on the winning side of it. But yeah, that was pretty intense.
Wow. And so for starters, like, I mean, did you ever have the moment of being like, shit, is like green vomit my superpower? Is
Not
the green
exactly my
vomit onto the bad guy gonna be what?
not my superpower,
Is
but
that
I
always gonna
definitely
be
thought
the
it was
solution?
powerful. It was definitely powerful. I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't think that that was it, but that was pretty good. I mean, at that moment, I have to say I was
It
pretty
was.
glad to have that if that's all I had. This is very early on in my apprenticeship. Over the years, you get a little bit more
Yeah.
capable and a little more sophisticated in how you handle those situations, but that's a very early, circa 2003 kind of story.
Ooh. And so this was the guy who was training you as
Yeah,
well,
that was the
right?
first
Like,
one. Well, he wasn't training me at that time. I had already split
mm,
off from him, but yeah, I mean, he was the first guy who
okay.
who tried to train me, or at least agreed to. I mean, maybe wink, wink. Maybe he wasn't really agreeing to. Maybe he was lying to me the whole time. But
Mm,
that was how it all started. And then there was another shaman I worked with, and she beat the crap out of me too. Yeah, she was really intense.
mm,
There's no gender bias in the Amazon over who's a shaman and who isn't. It's sort of like if you can, if you're there and you're good, that's it. And so she was fierce. She was an elder. Um, she was in her 70s and really fierce. And yeah, she
wow.
decided she was going to give me a test too. That was intense as well.
Mm. And so was the result of this battle like he came after you for your life? I mean, did you take his? I can imagine that's not, what you're trying to really do in battle.
No, I mean, really, the idea is protect yourself and then get it to a point where they're willing to quit. And so that depends on,
Mm,
who it is and how tough they are and, what they really want out of that experience and why they're doing it in the first place. I always think that you have to be very rational about how you think about these kinds of things because it's really easy to get really, out there and add a lot to it. It's really better just to leave it what it is and not really embellish it in any way. So you really have to think like what their motive
hmm.
is and their motivation. And in the case of the first person, it was because I no longer wanted to interact with them, and they had their feelings hurt. And I ended up
Oh
actually,
gosh.
yeah, training with other people that were close to them and blood relatives, and so it became this whole like family thing between them all. And
Mm,
the other person wanted me to develop a center with her and work with her, and I wasn't really interested in doing that, and so it was just a kind of revenge. Yeah. So you just,
wow.
you you deal with it until it's over, and then when it's over, you let them go.
And so who did you end up training with then? You finally found like a group who were willing to like be nice and loving and
Sort of, sort of. I mean, nice and loving was is yes down the road, but you had to earn it. It wasn't like nice out of the
mm.
box. It wasn't like how it is for us in the West, where everyone gets together and they all hug on the first day. Like, oh, it's so good to meet you. No, it's really not like that. They were like, who are you and why are you here? And I told them who I was and I told them why I was there, and they listened, but they were more reserved in that sense. And it took about almost 2 years for them to really accept me. So they watched me, they let me participate in
Wow.
ceremony with them, but it took a good year and 3 quarters before they accepted me to apprenticeship. And it was two guys. You know, the elder was Julio Llerena Pinedo. He was one of the
Mhm.
masters of that part of the Amazon. He was unbelievably well known and famous for his healing capacities and mystical capacities, and he really was one of the most powerful shamans I ever met. And so he taught me, he took me under his wing, and he was my head maestro during the time of my apprenticeship.
Oh, cool. And where is he now?
He passed away about 4 years into my apprenticeship. He passed away. He was in his late 80s when I met him,
Oh,
and so he died in his early 90s, and it was just a tremendous honor to get to spend that time with him.
I bet. And who did he pass on his lineage to, or do you still study with them? Or I guess you probably
Yeah,
don't
so
study anymore. You're a master yourself, but
well, you kind of always study. I mean, I would like to think you could get to a point where you're not. I mean, you don't really study the basics anymore, but you're always studying. You're learning from the plants and you're
hmm.
learning from consciousness, and so I think it's important to stay humble in that sense. But Um, yeah, Julio had a mesa, or a group of shamans that he worked with, and another shaman there was named Alberto Torres Davila, and I worked with him for many, many years. They were at that time kind of a duo, and they supported each other. And when I got involved, I was the third person. And then over the
Mm.
years, there were some other apprentices, and then one of Alberto's sons became part of the group as well. And so we all worked together for many,
Oh,
many years.
cool.
Yeah.
Oh, how beautiful. Well, all of your stories just really invigorate me, especially from the moment I first heard you on Aubrey's podcast. Like, I was like, I think I need to know this guy. So I'm really happy how the universe is panning out right now. And yeah, are there any last things you'd like my listeners to know, or how can they keep up with you? Are you on social media?
Yeah, you can, find us at bluemorphotours.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. Uh, so you can find us at Blue Morpho or Hamilton Souther on both Instagram and on Facebook. So, come check us out and meet us. And if you're interested in experiencing ayahuasca, come down to the Amazon and have an incredible time. And, it'd be a real pleasure to get to share this experience with you. And, as a parting thought, just, share these medicines with love, and explore and have a really good
Mm,
time, and be responsible, and, you know how powerful they really are. And I hope that some of these stories can help, just share how incredible these plants can be, and how much we can learn from them, and how much there is that's out there in this world that there's still to explore. And, to really embrace that for consciousness and for yourself, and just have a great time.
mm. I love that message. I know for me personally, I was doing the work on myself and doing, the mental things and getting my gratitude practice in play and shifting my mindset. But it was really when I started bringing in plant medicines that everything shifted permanently. My energy frequency shifted. I healed from things that I
Mm,
learned weren't with me even of this lifetime. And I like you, I desire that everyone have the opportunity to experience that, because you don't know what's going to work for you until you try. So give it a try, see what happens. There's usually light and love on the other side waiting for you.
for sure.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to being in touch.
Absolutely. You're very welcome. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and review this podcast wherever you're listening. I'm so grateful to have you on this journey with me. Until next time.